Let me tell you something. There's a particular kind of silence that only comes when your whole world has just cracked open. Not the peaceful kind, not the Sunday afternoon nap kind. I'm talking about the kind where you're standing on a sidewalk at 8 months pregnant, holding two trash bags full of your life, and the father of your child just locked the door behind you. And you realize he means it. Now, before you judge me, let me ask you something. Have you ever loved someone so hard you ignored every red flag because you thought love would repaint them green? Mm-hmm. I see you. I was 27 years old, young enough to believe promises, old enough to know better. Derek had a smile that could sell ice to Alaska. Smooth talker, sharp dresser, always had a big plan. You know the type. The man who says, "Baby, just wait till next year." Every single year. And I waited. When I told him I was pregnant, he stared at me like I had just handed him a bill instead of a blessing. "You sure it's mine?" he asked. Now listen, if I could go back in time, I wouldn't slap him. I'd charge him interest, because that question, that was the first crack in the foundation. But I stayed, because sometimes women don't leave when they should. We leave when we can. By the seventh month, the big plans had turned into late nights, then into no nights, then into whispers I wasn't meant to hear. And that night, the night he put me out, it wasn't even dramatic. No screaming, no neighbors watching, just him standing there saying, "I can't do this. I'm not ready." Not ready? Sir, the baby was almost ready. He handed me $40 like that was going to build a nursery somewhere. $40. I laughed, and when a pregnant woman laughs in that situation, that's not humor. That's survival kicking in. I slept at a bus station that night. Let me say that again, slowly. 8 months pregnant, bus station bench, two trash bags, $40, and a heart so broken I could hear it beating in my ears. Now, here's the part nobody talks about. It wasn't the homelessness that hurt the most. It was the abandonment. Because when a man leaves you, he doesn't just walk away from you. He walks away from the child, too. And children feel absence even before they understand it. I remember rubbing my stomach that night and whispering, "It's just me and you now." And I meant it. What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly know, was that the child growing inside of me would one day build something so powerful, so extraordinary, that the same man who left us would one day stand at our door again. Only this time, he wouldn't be holding $40. He'd be holding regret. But we're not there yet, because before there was success, there was struggle. And before there was wealth, there was hunger, literal hunger. And the next morning is where the real story begins. And trust me, if you think the sidewalk was the lowest point, oh no, we hadn't even touched bottom yet. The next morning, I woke up to a janitor nudging my foot with a mop. "Ma'am, you can't sleep here." Now, let me tell you something. There is nothing more humbling than having to explain to a stranger why you don't have anywhere else to go, while trying not to cry because if you start, you might not stop. I stood up slow, back aching, feet swollen like dinner rolls, and gathered my two trash bags like they were designer luggage. You couldn't tell me nothing. Pride is funny like that. It'll sit right beside you on a bus station bench and whisper, "Don't let them see you breaking." But I was breaking. $40 doesn't stretch far when you're pregnant and homeless. It barely stretches for gas money, let alone dignity. I bought a biscuit and a small orange juice from a fast food place across the street. That was breakfast and lunch combined. I remember staring at the cashier's name tag, Tamika, thinking, "Lord, let my baby grow up and never have to count change like this." Now pause right there. Let me ask you something. Have you ever prayed so quietly that even God had to lean in to hear you? That's how I prayed that day. I called my mother. Now, my mother and I weren't exactly close. She was the I told you so type. And when you're pregnant and homeless, the last thing you need is a remix of your bad decisions. But she answered. And when she heard my voice shake, she didn't say, I told you. She said, Where are you? 2 hours later, I was sitting in her living room on a plastic-covered couch that still made that squeaky sound when you shifted. You know the one. She didn't hug me, but she made me a plate. And in our family, that was love. Now, living with my mother at 27 felt like swallowing gravel. Every morning, she'd leave pamphlets on the kitchen table. Single mother's assistance, affordable housing, parenting classes. Subtle. Real subtle. But I took them, because survival will humble you faster than pride ever will. 2 weeks later, my son decided he wasn't waiting for stability. He came early. And when that nurse placed him in my arms, tiny, wrinkled, screaming like he had something to say, I knew one thing for sure. This boy was not going to inherit my struggle. I named him Isaiah. It means God is salvation, because I needed something to hold on to besides fear. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Derek didn't show up to the hospital. Not a call, not a text, not even a hospital flower that looked like it came from the clearance section. Nothing. And I told myself that was fine, because sometimes rejection is protection in disguise. But let me be honest with you. When I watched other fathers pacing the maternity floor, carrying balloons and nervous smiles, that silence cut deep. Still, I made a promise to Isaiah while he slept against my chest. It's just me and you, I whispered again, only this time it didn't sound broken. It sounded determined. What I didn't realize was that raising him alone wouldn't just shape him, it would sharpen him. Because some children grow up with silver spoons. Mine? He grew up watching his mother turn $40 into a future. And believe me, he was watching everything. But what happened when he turned 12? That's when I first saw it. The spark, the mind, the thing that would change our lives forever. And the day his father tried to come back? Oh, we're getting there. But first, you need to understand the boy who grew into a billionaire. And trust me, he didn't get there by accident. Now, let me tell you something about children. They may not say much, but they see everything. Isaiah was a quiet baby, didn't cry much, just watched. Big brown eyes following every move I made like he was taking notes. And maybe he was. We stayed with my mother for 3 years. 3 long, pride-swallowing plastic couch years. I worked 2 jobs, daytime receptionist at a dental office, night shift at a grocery store. If exhaustion were a sport, I'd have won gold. And don't let these young folks fool you. There's tired, and then there's rocking your baby to sleep while standing because if you sit down, you'll never get back up tired. That kind. But Isaiah never complained. Even at 4 years old, he'd sit at the kitchen table with crayons while I sorted bills. He'd ask, Mama, why you always countin' papers? I'd smile and say, because numbers tell the truth, baby. Little did I know, that sentence would stick with him. By the time he turned 7, he was different. Not in a, my child is gifted and reads Shakespeare at breakfast kind of way. No, he was curious about money. Not toys, not cartoons, money. One day, I came home and found him with a notebook full of drawings. Not superheroes, not dinosaurs, charts. Little boxes connected with arrows. I blinked twice. Baby, what is this? He looked up and said, It's how people make stores bigger. 7 years old. I laughed. Oh, is that all? But here's the thing. He wasn't playing. He'd sit with me when I paid bills asking questions most grown men I've dated couldn't answer. Why do we pay rent instead of buying the house? Why do they charge extra when you're late? Why don't we own the grocery store? Now, pause. What kind of child asks why we don't own the grocery store? A child who's been watching his mother struggle, that's who. By 12, Isaiah had started fixing broken electronics for neighbors. Old radios, remote controls, anything with wires. Where he learned that? I have no idea. YouTube University, I guess. He'd charge $5, sometimes 10, and instead of spending it, he saved it in a shoebox under his bed. One evening, I teased him, "Boy, what you saving for? A spaceship?" He didn't smile. "I'm saving so you don't have to work at night anymore." Now, let me tell you something. That right there, that's when I had to turn around and pretend I was looking for something in the cabinet, because tears don't ask permission. That was the moment I realized my son wasn't just surviving, he was strategizing. And somewhere out there, Derek was missing it all. He missed the science fair where Isaiah built a mini vending machine that actually worked. He missed the honor roll ceremonies. He missed the day Isaiah stood up to a teacher who assumed he wouldn't understand advanced math. "Don't lower the work," Isaiah told her. "Raise the expectation." 12 years old. Confidence like that doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in necessity. But here's the twist. Right around his 13th birthday, a letter came in the mail. Child support court. Derek had been found. And suddenly, the man who said he wasn't ready, he wanted visitation. And that's when things got complicated, because it's one thing to abandon a baby, it's another thing to show up when the boy is becoming something powerful. And I had to ask myself, was he coming back for his son or for something else? And trust me, the answer didn't show up in that courtroom. It showed up years later at my son's front door. Now let me tell you something about ghosts. They don't always rattle chains. Sometimes they show up in court documents. That letter said Derek was requesting visitation rights. Visitation! After 13 birthdays, 13 Christmas mornings, 13 first days of school, now he wanted Saturdays. I sat at the kitchen table holding that paper like it might burst into flames. My mother looked over her glasses and said, "What do you want now?" That's the thing about men who leave. They don't come back quietly. They come back when they think there's something to gain. But legally, he had rights, and I had a decision to make. Now let me ask you something. If someone walks out on your child, do they still deserve access to their growth? That's not a question they prepare you for in parenting books. Isaiah was 13, tall for his age, sharp eyes, sharp mind. I sat him down. "Your father wants to see you." He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just leaned back in his chair and asked, "Why?" "That's my son. Straight to the balance sheet." "I don't know," I told him. He nodded slowly. "Does he need something?" Whew. Children know. They feel intention like temperature changes. The first meeting happened at a diner, neutral ground. I remember watching Derek walk in. Older, thicker around the middle, same smile though. That smile used to fool me. It didn't fool my son. "Isaiah," Derek said, spreading his arms like this was a reunion tour. Isaiah shook his hand. Shook his hand. Not a hug, not a rush of emotion. A handshake, like two businessmen meeting to discuss a contract. And in that moment, I knew something had shifted. Derek tried the usual lines. "I've always kept an eye on you. I'm proud of the young man you're becoming. I just needed time to get myself together." Time? Sir, Amazon delivers faster than that. Isaiah listened politely. Then he asked, "What do you do for work?" Direct. Calm. Derek hesitated. "I'm in between opportunities right now." Translation? Nothing stable. The conversation lasted 40 minutes. Isaiah spoke maybe 5 sentences, but every word had weight. When we left, I asked him how he felt. He looked out the car window and said something I will never forget. "He doesn't know me." Not angry, Not bitter, just factual. And that was the truth. Derek was meeting a version of Isaiah he hadn't invested in, and you can't withdraw from a bank you never deposited into. Visitation continued for a few months. Lunch here, a movie there, but something was off. Derek kept asking about school programs, about competitions, about scholarships, and one afternoon, after Isaiah won a regional tech contest, the prize money more than Derek made in months, I saw it. That look in Derek's eyes. It wasn't pride, it was calculation. And that's when I realized he wasn't reconnecting, he was assessing. See, when my son was a burden, Derek disappeared. But when he started looking like potential, now he wanted proximity. And that's a dangerous thing, because ambition without character, that's a storm waiting to happen. But what Derek didn't understand was this. Isaiah had inherited my heart, but he developed his own mind. And by 16, that mind was already building something none of us could fully comprehend, including me, especially Derek. And the day Isaiah made his first real money, that's when everything changed. Not just for us, but for the man who handed me $40, because suddenly, the numbers were a whole lot bigger. By the time Isaiah turned 16, the house felt different. Not bigger, not fancier, just charged. You ever walk into a room and feel like something's about to happen, like the air is holding its breath? That's how it felt. Isaiah had been working on something in his room for months. Laptop open, headphones on, legal pads stacked high with notes that looked like a foreign language to me. Code, he called it. Now listen, I come from the generation where code meant knocking on the door a certain way so your cousin knew it was you. But this was different. One evening, he came into the kitchen, calm as ever, and said, "Mama, I launched it." Launched what? A platform. See, when your child says words like that and you don't understand them, you just nod and say, "That's nice, baby." But 2 weeks later, he wasn't nodding. He was pacing, excited. People were signing up. Businesses were using it. Something about simplifying digital payments for small vendors. You know, the same kind of vendors I used to count coins for at the grocery store. Isaiah built a system that made transactions cheaper and faster for small businesses. Why? I asked him. He looked at me like I'd asked why the sky was blue. Because small stores lose money the most. That boy had been watching longer than I realized. The first check came in the mail. I remember holding it like it might disappear. It had more zeros than I'd ever seen on something addressed to us. And here's the part that still makes me laugh. I said, "Is this legal?" He laughed for once. Really laughed. "Yes, ma'am." At 17, Isaiah turned down multiple colleges. Let me say that again slowly for the parents in the back. Multiple colleges. Full scholarships. He chose to build instead. Now, I'll be honest, I was scared. Security matters when you've known instability. But he said something that stopped me cold. "Mama, you taught me numbers don't lie, and these numbers say we can build something bigger." He reinvested everything, hired 2 friends, then 5, then 20. The company grew faster than I could keep up with. Articles started appearing online, interviews, investors calling. And guess who started calling more often, too? Derek. Suddenly, he had advice. Suddenly, he wanted to mentor. "Sir, you missed math homework for 10 years. Now you want to talk equity?" One evening, Derek showed up unannounced, standing on my porch like he used to. Except this time, the house wasn't my mother's. It was mine. Paid off. Isaiah bought it for me at 18, walked in one day and handed me the keys. "No more plastic couch," he said. Now when Derek stepped inside, he looked around slowly. measuring, calculating. Same look from that diner. He tried to sound casual. So, what's the company valued at? Isaiah answered without emotion. Enough. That was it. Enough. But let me tell you something. When money enters a room, it reveals everybody's true intentions. And Derek's were getting clearer by the day. He started talking about family legacy, about his son carrying his name. Funny how names matter when net worth gets involved. But Isaiah wasn't moved. He respected biology, but he honored loyalty. And loyalty had a different face in our house. By 25, my son was officially a billionaire. Let that sink in. From bus station bench to billionaire. And I thought that was the final chapter. I was wrong, because success has a way of attracting unfinished business. And a rainy evening, years after that $40, Derek showed up again. But this time, he wasn't asking for visitation. He was asking for something entirely else. And what he said at my son's front door almost made history repeat itself. It was raining the night Derek showed up. Not a soft, romantic drizzle either. I'm talking about the kind of rain that hits the windows like it has something to prove. Isaiah's house, his estate, sat high on a hill overlooking the city. Glass walls, iron gates, the kind of place people slow down to stare at. And every time I visit, I remember that bus station bench, because contrast will humble you if success doesn't. We were having dinner, just the two of us, simple, quiet. That's how Isaiah prefers it. He may run a billion-dollar company, but at home, he's still the boy who asks if I want more tea. Then the security panel chimed. Someone at the gate. Isaiah glanced at the screen, and there he was. Derek. Older now, grayer, shoulders slightly bent, not with humility, but with time. For a moment, neither of us spoke. You ever notice how the past doesn't knock softly? It pounds. Isaiah didn't look surprised. He just looked resolved. "Let him in," he said calmly. "Now let me ask you something. If the man who once handed you $40 while you were pregnant and homeless shows up at your billionaire son's gate, do you let him stand in the rain? Or do you open the door?" I'll tell you this much. God has a sense of humor, because the same rain that soaked my coat on that sidewalk years ago was now dripping from Derek's expensive-looking jacket as he stepped into the marble foyer. He looked around slowly, at the chandelier, at the staircase, at the art, and then at Isaiah. "My son," he said. Isaiah didn't move to hug him, didn't extend a hand this time either, just nodded. Evening. Polite, measured, like a CEO greeting a late investor. We sat in the living room. The silence stretched long enough to charge rent. Finally, Derek cleared his throat. "I've been meaning to talk to you about something important." Important. That word again. Isaiah leaned back slightly. "I'm listening." Now here's where it gets interesting. Derek started talking about a business opportunity, something he'd been developing. A real estate venture, needed capital, strategic partnership, family collaboration. I almost laughed, because let's translate that into plain English, shall we? He needed money, but he wrapped it in pride so it wouldn't look like begging. Isaiah didn't interrupt, didn't react, just listened. When Derek finished, he leaned forward slightly and asked one simple question. "Why me?" And that's when Derek said it. Because family should help family. Now pause. Family? Where was that word when hospital bills were due? Where was family when diapers cost more than $40? The room felt smaller suddenly, heavy. Isaiah stood up and walked toward the window. Rain streaking down the glass behind him, and for the first time all evening I saw something flicker across his face. Not anger, not sadness, reflection. Because this wasn't about money, it was about history, and history has receipts. Derek kept talking about second chances, about mistakes, about being young and scared. And part of me wondered, was this regret or was it desperation? There's a difference, a big one. Finally, Isaiah turned around. And what he said next, it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it carried more weight than any check he'd ever written. Because in that moment, the little boy who once saved $5 in a shoebox was about to settle a debt no bank could measure. And Derek had no idea what kind of answer was coming. Isaiah stood there for a long moment, rain sliding down the glass behind him like time itself was listening. Then he walked back to his chair, calm, controlled, centered. "Let me ask you something," he said to Derek. His voice wasn't sharp, it wasn't emotional, it was surgical. "When you left my mother, what was your plan?" Now that question, that wasn't about money. That was about accountability. Derek shifted in his seat, crossed one leg over the other, uncrossed it. "I was young," he started. "I wasn't ready. I didn't have guidance." Isaiah nodded slowly. "I was young too," he replied, "when I decided I didn't want my mother working night shifts anymore." Silence. You could hear the rain again, because truth has a way of clearing rooms. Derek tried another angle. "I've watched you build something incredible. I just want to be part of it." Part of it. That phrase hung in the air like perfume that doesn't quite smell right. Isaiah leaned forward. "You weren't part of the struggle." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You weren't there when she fell asleep sitting up. You weren't there when I asked why we didn't own the grocery store. You weren't there when I learned what interest rates were before I learned how to drive." Each sentence landed steady, measured, controlled. Derek's face tightened. "I'm here now." Now. Now that the house has gates. Now that the company has valuation. Now that the boy has become a headline. Isaiah looked at him carefully, and then he did something I didn't expect. He smiled. Not a mocking smile, not a cruel one, a knowing one. "You're right. Family should help family." Derek's posture shifted, hope rising. And that's when Isaiah reached into his pocket, not for a checkbook, not for a phone, for a folded envelope. He placed it on the coffee table. "Open it." Derek looked confused, but obeyed. Inside was a cashier's check for $40. $40. The exact amount he handed me the night he locked that door. The room went still. Derek stared at it. "I don't understand." Isaiah's voice remained even. "That was your investment. Now let me tell you something. I felt something release in my chest that I didn't even know I'd been carrying for decades. Because sometimes closure doesn't come with tears. It comes with balance. You gave my mother $40 when she was pregnant and homeless. Consider this your return." Derek's face flushed. "That's not what I meant." "I know," Isaiah interrupted gently. And that's when the real lesson came. If you want to build something, build it. I can connect you with financial literacy programs, small business incubators, advisors. He paused. "But I won't fund what you didn't help create." Not cruel, not vindictive, just principled. Derek stood slowly, the weight of realization settling over him heavier than the rain outside. "This is how you treat your father?" Isaiah met his eyes. "This is how I treat a man who taught me the value of self-reliance." Now that wasn't anger. That was evolution. Derek left without another word. The door closed softly behind him, and I sat there, stunned. Because revenge would have been loud, petty would have been easy. But my son? He chose dignity. And as I looked at him, the boy who once saved coins in a shoebox, I realized something powerful. He didn't become a billionaire because of money. He became one because he understood value. But here's the part that surprised me most. 2 weeks later, something happened that none of us expected. Because sometimes, when pride gets humbled, it doesn't disappear. It transforms. And Derek? He wasn't done learning yet. 2 weeks passed. No calls, no surprise visits, no dramatic text messages sent at 2:17 a.m. talking about we need to talk. Just silence. And I'll be honest, I thought that was the end of it. Closure wrapped neatly in a $40 envelope. Isaiah went back to running his company, meetings, travel, headlines, the usual. But one afternoon, he came by my house. Yes, my paid-off, no-plastic couch house, and he looked thoughtful. Not stressed, just reflective. "You hear from him?" I asked. He shook his head. Then he surprised me. "I've been thinking." Now, whenever a billionaire says that, you sit down. "I don't regret what I said," he continued, "but I don't want to become someone who closes doors just because someone once closed one on us." That right there, that's maturity. Because bitterness is easy. Growth is intentional. He explained that after Derek left that night, security found something at the gate the next morning. A note. Not addressed to my son, not signed with dramatic flair, just a simple apology. 3 sentences long, no excuses, no business proposal, just, "I was wrong. I didn't know how to be a man back then. I'm trying to learn now." Now, let me ask you something. Is regret more powerful when it's loud or when it's quiet? Isaiah had read that note 3 times. He didn't show it to the press, didn't post a cryptic message online, didn't turn it into a motivational quote. He just sat with it. "I don't owe him access," he said, "but I don't want to owe him resentment either." Whew, that's a different kind of wealth. So Isaiah did something that shocked me. He didn't send money, he didn't offer partnership, he sent information. A list of business workshops, a contact for a mentorship program, a recommendation for therapy. Because sometimes what people need isn't capital, it's correction. And here's the twist. Derek actually showed up to those workshops. Isaiah found out months later through one of his advisors. He wasn't bragging about his son, wasn't name-dropping, just learning, quietly, starting small, real small. And for the first time in decades, I felt something I never thought I would feel about that man. Not anger, not even forgiveness, just neutrality. And neutrality is peace's older cousin. But here's where the story comes full circle. About a year later, Isaiah hosted a community event, free financial literacy summit for single parents. Hundreds showed up, mothers with strollers, fathers trying to figure it out, grandparents raising grandbabies. And standing near the back of the room was Derek. Not in a suit trying to look important, not at the front asking for recognition, just sitting, taking notes. Isaiah saw him. Our eyes met for just a second, and he didn't flinch. He kept teaching, kept pouring into people who reminded him of us. Because here's the truth. The greatest revenge isn't humiliation, it's elevation. And the little boy who once whispered, "I'm saving so you don't have to work at night anymore," he kept that promise. But more than that, he broke a cycle. From bus station bench to billionaire boardroom, from $40 to financial freedom. And when people ask me how he did it, I tell them this. He learned early that numbers don't lie, but character, that's the real currency. And sometimes the people who leave you at your lowest become the footnote in your legacy, not the author of it. Now, tell me something. If someone who once abandoned you showed up at your door today, would you hand them $40 or would you hand them a lesson? Because life will give you both options. And the choice? That's your true net worth. Now, before we close this story, let me take you somewhere quiet. Not to the bus station, not to the mansion, not to the hospital, but to a kitchen table. Because every legacy, good or bad, starts at a table. A few months after that hospital visit, Isaiah invited me over for dinner again. Just us. No assistants, no board members, no security hovering nearby. He cooked. Now, I don't care how many billions are in your bank account. When your son cooks for you, that's wealth. We sat down, and he asked me something that caught me off guard. Mama, did you ever hate him? Now that question right there, that's not about the past. That's about inheritance. Because children don't just inherit eye color, they inherit emotional patterns. I took a deep breath. No, I said slowly. I was hurt, I was angry, but hate is heavy, and I was already carrying you. He smiled at that. You see, bitterness would have been easy, but bitterness leaks into conversations, into confidence, into how a child sees himself. And I refused to let Isaiah grow up believing he was half of someone I despised. That's important. For anyone listening who's raising children alone, be careful how you speak about the absent parent, because children don't separate criticism from identity. They internalize it. Isaiah leaned back in his chair. I think that's why I don't feel the need to punish him, he said. And that's when I realized something powerful. We didn't just survive abandonment, we metabolized it, turned pain into principle. Now let me ask you something. How many of us are still reacting to wounds that happened 30 years ago, still arguing with ghosts, still trying to win fights that ended a long time ago? Isaiah didn't need revenge, because success already answered the question Derek asked the night he left. Are you sure it's mine? Oh, it was his. But the character, that was built elsewhere. Over time, Derek's presence became steady. Not central, not dominant, just there. Birthday cards, occasional phone calls, respectful check-ins. And that's enough sometimes. You don't have to rebuild a mansion where a shack once stood. Sometimes you just build a fence. And that's wisdom. Years later, when Isaiah was interviewed on national television, yes, national, the host asked him the usual question. To what do you attribute your success? Now this was his moment. He could have said innovation, timing, market disruption. Instead, he said, to a woman who turned $40 into a foundation. I wasn't even in the room and I felt taller. Because here's the truth. Money multiplies what's already there. If you're bitter, it makes you bigger and bitter. If you're generous, it amplifies that too. Isaiah became a billionaire not because he chased wealth, but because he chased solutions. And he never forgot the feeling of watching his mother count bills at a kitchen table. That memory, that was his fuel. So if you're listening right now, maybe remembering your own struggles, know this. Your children are watching. They're learning how to respond to hardship. They're studying how you carry pain. And one day, they might stand at their own front door with someone from the past asking for something. When that moment comes, will they answer with resentment or with resolve? That choice, it starts long before the knock. And if there's one thing I've learned from this whole journey, it's this. $40 can leave you homeless, But 40 years of character, that can build an empire. And that, my friends, is a return no one can take away. You know what's funny? Everybody talks about the knock at the door, the dramatic one, the unexpected one, the one that changes everything. But the knock that really matters is the one you don't hear. It's the quiet decision you make when no one's watching, the choice to keep going, the choice not to harden, the choice to build anyway. Years after that rainy night, I asked Isaiah something. "Do you ever think about that $40? He smiled. "Only when I'm calculating returns. That's my son." But then he got serious. "I think about the bus station more." Now that surprised me. "Why?" I asked. Because that's where our story really started. Not at the billion-dollar valuation, not at the interviews, not at the estate with the iron gates, but on a cold bench with a pregnant woman who refused to quit. Let me tell you something plainly. I didn't raise a billionaire. I raised a boy who understood responsibility. The money followed. And if you're listening, maybe you're raising children alone, maybe you've been left holding the pieces, maybe someone handed you your own version of $40 and a closed door. Hear me clearly. That moment does not define your ceiling. It defines your starting line. Derek and Isaiah's relationship, it's settled into something steady, respectful, measured. No forced closeness, no fake performances for the outside world. Just accountability and distance. And that's okay. Forgiveness doesn't always mean full access. Sometimes it means releasing the weight and keeping the boundary. Now here's something I haven't told you yet. Last year, Isaiah started a foundation. Guess what it focuses on? Single mothers building financial independence. He didn't name it after himself. He named it after his grandmother, the woman with the plastic-covered couch who made plates instead of speeches. Because legacy isn't loud, it's layered. And at the first foundation gala, standing in a room filled with entrepreneurs, investors, community leaders, I thought about that night at the bus station, about the janitor nudging my foot, about the biscuit and orange juice, about whispering, "It's just me and you." I was wrong about that. It was never just me and him. It was resilience. It was faith. It was quiet discipline stacking up day after day. And yes, it was even Derek's absence teaching a lesson none of us could ignore. Now let me ask you one final question. If the person who hurt you most showed up at your door after you built everything without them, would you hand them a check, a speech, or a mirror? My son chose a mirror, and sometimes that's the greatest gift of all, because money can open gates, but character decides who walks through them. So if you're still in your bus station season, hold on. If you're in your counting bills season, keep going. And if life ever gives you the chance to balance an old debt, balance it with wisdom. Because $40 might start the story, but it doesn't get to write the ending. And that's the kind of wealth that no one can take from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. If this story touched your heart, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories about resilience, dignity, and quiet justice. Because some lessons don't come with applause. They come with peace.